Remember when Toronto condo prices were $300,000? Stay tuned to find out exactly what I'm talking about on this week's episode of Prime Props TV. Promise you, it'll be worth it. Good day, Toronto. Welcome to another episode of Prime Props TV. So glad you joined me here today. Today, I'm going to take you through a history of the Toronto condo market, specifically the downtown one. And I'm doing this as a reminder to everyone that what we have in the Toronto real estate market. But keep in mind that past results do not indicate what's going to happen in the future, but it's also just to show you an idea of how rapidly things can change, because we've had a lot of change in the last 5-7 years in the Toronto condo space. But remember, nobody can predict the future, even me with the crystal ball, So we only can make our best guess with what data we have right now, because we would not be able to predict any wild events such as a pandemic and a war at specific times in history. Plus, data changes, and we need to be able to kind of take that data and pivot it and apply to what's happening right now. So let's rewind back to 2008 when the Toronto condo prices, specifically in the CO1 downtown area, were $300,000 on average. Yes, $300,000, where a one bedroom was in the mid to high 200,000s. The two bedrooms were in the low to mid 300. And yes, penthouse 3 bedrooms were selling for almost $500,000, $500K. And as a reference right now, $500,000 barely buys you a 400 square foot bachelor's downtown right now in the CO1 area. Just wild. But first, let's look at the history of the average price in the CO1 since 2008. And you can see that on the right-hand side that prices are actually super volatile. Lots of red, lots of green. I can give you my memories of pricing as far back as I could, at least from my trading days, more than a decade ago. There was a condo boom in the early 2010s. So this was 2010, 2011 when I first got licensed. However, it was always focused on the freehold at that time because freeholds were possible, right? And everyone wanted to detach. And there was this notion that condo fees that were costing 20 to 35% of your mortgage was just absolutely wild, right? In terms of carrying costs. You have to remember, when prices were this low back in the day, the condo fees as a percentage of what you pay every single month was obviously much higher, because that hasn't really changed too much. It's just the prices have gone up. Therefore, mortgages have gotten bigger. Now it's probably closer to 15, 20% or so. And then in the mid 2010s, that's when pre-construction got more and more popular because there was more money to be made there. And we had a boom there. These were the days, for those of you who don't remember, there were long lineups to get an allocation. You could buy stuff with 5% deposit. And that was actually when assignments were super lucrative due to 5% deposit and a lot less scrutiny from the CRA on assignments. Then you had the wild run up of post 2017 when the freehold market in the 905 completely blew up and everybody flocked to condos. And that was kind of the start of the massive condo bull run because affordability. Then you had the stress test come in the year afterwards, right at January. And, we start talking about affordability more because they drove the prices up like crazy and people couldn't borrow as much, right? It went from 7 to 8 times your income to 5 times. And this kept going until the pandemic, which you can see in the numbers over here reflected in the 2021 numbers and where they got crushed. Then that gets us to here today, right? Now let's focus on 2008, and you're going to kind of get why I'm kind of starting from 2008. So I pulled some old condo listings to give you an idea of kind of what I'm talking about, because while you can look at these numbers and see kind of what prices are, let me just provide some more color of what back in the day was. Now you can see this listing over here is 12 Yonge. This is the OG building at Pinnacle Center. This is an 897 square foot unit that was recently completed, and it sold for $380,000, or what is equivalent of $423 a foot. Yeah, wild. And if you look at the photos over here, you can see some of the original finishes. Actually, fun fact, if you look at some of the 12 Yonge units right now, they still look like that because they've never updated and have carpets everywhere. But if you look at the last photo pointed out over here, you can see the west exposure view. And the reason I'm showing this is because look how much has changed. There's barely any condos there on that. And here's kind of the Google Street View from us facing west on the ground, right? So the units I've highlighted in yellow are the ones that are built now, and you can see the vast difference between what is like 13, 14 years. Crazy, right? Here's another interesting outlier I pulled up for you over here. This was also a new building at 2008 that recently finished at City Place, and this is 15 Fort York, right? So City Place was still partially a golf course back then. You can imagine it was a lot of land, and Concord had it for a while. And this is a resale penthouse that was bought directly from the builder, meaning it didn't sell during the pre-construction phase because, pre-construction for a building that finished in 08 wasn't that popular. And you can see that it sold for way above the average price, and it went for $626,000, putting it at the super expensive at the time price point of $600 per foot. But this is a 2-bedroom penthouse view facing east directly. Wow, right? And if you also look at the photos, how great they were. They're not that great. And as a reference point for anyone who doesn't remember where tech was at this period, because maybe you're younger, these photos were taken between the time when the first iPhone came out and the next iPhone 3G, which was my first smartphone. So I'm dating myself. So it's just wild, right? If you think about it. And here's kind of a view of the ground from the building. And same thing, I've highlighted yellow, which is where built. And you can still see that 4K Spadina, the building that doesn't have windows yet, is still being built. And none of the condos behind these buildings backing into the City Place that's fully built out right now even existed. Crazy, right? If this is the type of real estate content you enjoy, make sure to help us spread the knowledge by smashing the like button and subscribing to the Prime Props channel. And thank you all for subscribing because we broke 7,000 subscribers. That's actually crazy to think that I started this because I don't want to say the same thing over and over again, like 4 years back. But thank you very much for that. And we put all this content out there because every single week we want to talk about real estate content and topics that matter the most to you so that we, my team and I, are transparent and honest with you about what the heck is going on so that whenever you are ready for making that next real estate move, whether it's buying, selling, or investing, you'll be like, you know what? Zen and his team, they know what they're talking about, and you'll book a call with me using this link right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com. So back to the point I was making and why I'm making this, and almost forgot how long I took to make this, is we always forget how much change can happen in a decade, right? Here are just some other photos of the entertainment district where I was trading when I first got started, right? From before the condo boom, right? So, for the youngins out there, the entertainment district is called the entertainment district because that's where all the clubs were, and all the clubs became condos. It's the same thing our fashion district in King West was called fashion district because that's where all the textiles and the silk and all the materials were sold back in the day. Here's a snapshot of us facing north on Blue Jays Way, just south of Wellington. And you can see all the 40+ story condos are missing in the top photo over here, right? And at the intersection of, say, Blue Jay, Peter, and King, because Blue Jay becomes Peter, right? That's what I would deem like the core center of Prime Entertainment District. And you can see it's totally different. Now, here's another shot facing east into that rough area on Adelaide, and you can see that there's barely anything in the skyline until we get into the financial district, right? So the point here is things can change a lot in 10 years, and crazy if you think about it. Remember, we're in a growing city right now, and you cannot underestimate the fundamentals of Toronto and Canada as a whole. It's a lot of immigration coming in, and plus other things, right? And as another snapshot, this right here is a market watch from the Toronto Real Estate Board. Before it's called TRREB, it was TREB for condos. And you can see that in CO1, there's 194 sales. We can do that amount of sales on a good week in CO1 right now. Times change. A lot of things can change in a decade. And the last thing I'll bring you through memory lane is how the numbers work back in the day, because people are always wondering how the heck do people have so many properties? Let me show you. This is the current investment calculator that I've used, and if you're a client of mine, you'll probably recognize it. And I just applied the calculations to the 12-bedroom unit I showed you earlier. And back in the day, in early 2008, you could get the mortgage for 0% down payment. Yes, 0. And 40-year amortization. Yes, 40. And then the bank would also give you some money for closing costs as well, meaning that your financing was over 100%. Yeah, that was a thing. Although you got to keep in mind, the variable interest rate back in the day was a high 4.43%. That's still low. Anyways, this is also back in the day when you could get a mortgage with just your driver's license if you showed up at the bank. Now, what this ultimately meant, even though when you think about this compared to now, it's absolutely crazy. Again, time changes. This meant that you could buy condos for 0 money and it would only be cash flow negative $130 a month. Crazy, right? Crazy. You could barely make a condo cash flow neutral right now unless you have more than 30% down plus, right? Think again, 10-year difference, what that makes. Now, obviously, in this snapshot, the mortgage rules changed shortly afterwards in 2008, where your amortization shrank from 40 to 35. And that's when they implemented the 5% down, because it was shortly after the great financial crisis, right? GFC. But still, right, thinking back then, wild. And this was the era that my wife and I always joked about how we should have taken all our OSAP money in 05 and 06 and just bought pre-construction condos and we at 5% down and not have to work ever again right now. Because back in the day, you could buy 1-bedroom condos, we're in the mid 200s, and we wouldn't need to close on them until we graduated, where getting a mortgage was very easy by having a job, right? And a condo would have costed us somewhere between like $15,000, give or take at the time, which meant that we could have bought one each semester. Man, if I was only smarter with my money back as a kid. There are so many points, and I'm trying to point out here in the last 13 years, which any one of us, myself included, and you that are watching right now, that we could have entered the market to see some of these wild gains. Now, this isn't to say that you should jump in now because of past results, because past results don't dictate what's going to happen in the future. Again, I keep reminding everyone, despite how much I'm giving you a prediction and how much of it has come true, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just looking at data. And as you probably have heard me say, I right now actually don't think pre-cons make any sense, despite my joke earlier about buying pre-cons every semester in school, right? And it just doesn't make sense for most people. However, it doesn't mean that the fundamentals for Toronto condos don't exist right now, because they do. They still very much do. You just need to understand where the opportunities are right now, right? Because at every single time, things change and the strategy may change. And we have absolutely bonkers immigration numbers coming in from the mandate of the federal government. I think we're just starting to have the right amount of construction starts in the downtown core, which means that it takes anywhere between 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, depending on the height of the building, for that inventory to hit the market. Inflation is still stupid, ridiculously high. Rates are still relatively low, depending on where you're coming from. I think anything sub 3% on variable is still very low. So I'm going to say it's been pinned to the floor still. And yes, I am still in the camp that 3 interest rate hikes max this year. We've had 1, so I got 2 more to go. Plus, money is still so cheap right now because inflation is super running hot right now relative to cost of borrow, right? So real estate will hold its value better than cash, right? This is all to say that in long term, the outlook for Toronto is good. But will there be volatility between now and say maybe like 10 years? Absolutely. You saw the first chart. I'll bring it back up over here, right? Red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green. It's bound to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. But it's like that old saying goes. If you have a long-term horizon, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. This is why I've always advocated for buying and holding, because you kind of smooth out the volatility. And as long as we have a long-term horizon, it's very, 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 very difficult to mess up real estate because it holds its value and someone's paying for it and it's leveraged. And remember, everyone kept calling for a bubble at some point in the last 13 years plus that I've been trading. And obviously there were price drops here and there. And it's called volatility, like I was saying earlier. But when you have that long-term horizon, call it you hold it for a minimum 5 years, they tend to smooth out. And the fundamentals are still here in Toronto right now. So they still make sense. You just have to ignore all the chatter about what's going on and kind of you look at the last video talking about like prices coming out 24%. Just ignore it and understand the fundamentals in Toronto are still great. Now, if you're trying to understand whether it makes sense for you to buy and invest in the CO1 area, that's actually where I'm recommending a lot of my clients right now. You can book a call with me using the link right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com so that we can kind of strategize to see if we can slot that investment for your long time horizon. I don't do short term. That's why I always ask ridiculous questions sometimes when you're talking to me. But the idea is I want to set you up for a long-term success, right? Not just like a quick flip. Because I've always said, real estate is always about getting rich slow, not getting rich quick. That's always been my thing, right? So if that's something that is of interest to you, then you can book a call with me using the link right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com. Until next time, your move, your future. See ya. Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one? Oh, you know what? This one's good too. Ooh, this one's really good. You know what? Just watch them both.